Welcome to another edition of Preps Plus Extra. How you doing? I'm Mark Stewart, prep editor of the Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel. You know him, he's J.R. Radcliffe, sports editor of Now Newspapers. How you doing this week?
Doing great. Love this time of year. It's great for football fans to be immersed in the playoffs. The level 1 games there's always a few surprises, few upsets, but level 2 is when you really get some of the big matchups of the year.
Yeah, and that's going to be the case this week. But you talked about upsets. You know, Fond du Lac, Menominee Falls is probably the one that kind of stands out in our area in Division I. But that said, I mean, it does, we are still left with a number of really good matchups at the level 2 level in Division I. Let's start there. What's your pick this week? What's your game?
I think we're going to see, it's kind of there's a corner of the bracket I'm really intrigued by. That's where, I think it's the northeast, where you've got Oconomowoc taking on Middleton and Mukwonago taking on Sun Prairie. I think this is kind of a little bit of a referendum on whether or not suburban Milwaukee has the tougher teams or the Madison area has the tougher teams, because we've talked about the Big 8 conference in Madison before. We never know a lot about them because they play only within their conference. We never really learn any sort of data from a non-conference game, maybe playing a team from outside the Madison area. So we never really know how strong the conference is when we get to the playoffs. Well, last week I think it's sort of a point in Milwaukee's court, because you had Mukwonago, which went in as the 5th seed to 4th seed Madison La Follette, shut them out 25-0. A lot of people, myself included, thought Madison West would give Oconomowoc a little run for their money, even though that was a 7-2 seed matchup, and Oconomowoc took them down very easily. So now those teams have some tougher opponents from the Big 8, including Sun Prairie, which is an undefeated squad, 10-0, one of the 2 10-0 teams still playing, and they face off with the Mukwonago team that's very dangerous, has a lot of playmakers, and can probably make some things happen, even though they're just a 4th place team. That Classic 8 conference is so tough, and then Cooney Middleton's another one of those games that I think could go either way. It could be really intense.
Yeah, and that Classic 8, the Classic 8 and the Big 8. I mean, and this has been going on for years in terms of how they've been meeting up in the playoffs, and really for the most part, I think the Classic 8 has gotten the best of those matchups, give or take.
Yeah, there was one year where the Big 8 took them down pretty hard, but that like 3 years ago maybe, but ever since then.
Right, yeah. What I'm looking at is, in that southeast corner of the bracket, we got, 2-3 weeks ago we were talking Franklin, Kenosha Indian Trail. Mm-hmm. We got them again. This time they're going to be playing at Franklin. Kenosha Indian Trail really came back, I think, with a vengeance last week and really took it to Oak Creek when, there was, they had that 2-game losing streak, and you're wondering, okay, well, are they coming back to earth a little bit? And boom, they really took it to a team that was playing pretty well. This time we'll see, if they can maybe finish the job against Franklin. They made a nice comeback in that first meeting, and Franklin got an interception toward the near their goal line in the red zone to kind of save that victory. So that's going to be a great matchup. The other one in that part of the bracket, Marquette, Lake Geneva Badger, 2 conference champions. And, last week, we'll talk about Division II in a little bit, but, one of the Southern Lakes champions lost to, a pretty solid Whitefish Bay team. So in a way, you talk about referendums on conferences. I like the Southern Lakes. I think they kind of get lost in the shuffle sometimes.
Totally agree, yep.
But this will be one of those cases where, okay, after 2 weeks of the playoffs, will your 2 of your 3 champions be gone? So that's gonna be something that we'll be looking at as well.
I know one topic of conversation that came up a little bit. It seems to come up every year. The way the playoff system is set up is if you don't get to host a first round game and you win in the second round, going up against a team that also already did get to host, you get a chance to host. They want to spread the wealth around. So say 5th seeded Mukwonago didn't host in the first round, even though the team they're playing is the top seed in Sun Prairie, who did get to host the first round game. Sun Prairie now has to come to Mukwonago. Germantown's in the same boat. They have to hit the road simply because the team on the other side of the bracket that was supposed to win didn't win. So in a way, I know there's some consternation that penalizes the better teams that do win, that they have to go on the road even though they're the better seed. But again, I'm sure coaches in that situation would say you got to win no matter where you play, no matter who you play, if you want to be state champion.
Yeah, and really, it's not like basketball. I know home field advantage plays a role, but I think it plays less of a role.
I agree, yes.
In football. And a lot of times coaches just want a good field. Mm-hmm. And sometimes if that field hasn't been played on in 2 or 3 weeks, then that might be better than their home field. All right, well, now it's time to shift gears to Division II. Sussex Hamilton beat Brookfield Central in a level 1 matchup. Let's hear what Drew Patterson had to say about his big run, and let's hear what Coach John D'Amato has to say about moving on.
We just did a little empty set, brought it in motion, and just hit it with our normal play we usually do up the middle. All credit goes to the line. They played good. They had a good push. Wingbacks blocked great. It was a good team win. Good team win.
Yeah, you know, we schemed them all week. We had all the tape in the world on them, and I know they had the same on us. So we knew it was going to be a hard-fought game. And our kids executed the game plan, and at the end they came out on the right end, on the W.
Speaking of Sussex Hamilton, they're probably part of the big game this week. We touched on it last week. Sussex Hamilton and Homestead, they're going to meet this week in Level 2, and the game that, you know, if I had one I could go to, that would be the one I would like to just kind of sit and maybe if I could watch it from a direct feed under a blanket or something would be nice. But I mean, you've seen those teams. What are your thoughts going into that showdown?
I have a pretty good hunch about Sussex Hamilton. It just feels like this team could at least threaten Homestead. I still think Homestead's got to be the team to beat here. But the fact that Hamilton has played, beaten Brookfield Central twice, played really two very close games, and shown that they can win those types of games. They've got some recent history in their program of beating undefeated teams. They beat Manitowoc a couple years ago. I know that has no bearing on this year. Beat Waunakee in 2008, but I just have a feeling. I don't really have any good analysis to go with that. I think Homestead is a tremendous program, and again, should still be heavily favored. But when you look at their situation, they know that Kimberly's waiting for them if they win that Level 2 game. And anytime you're talking about high school athletics, there's that tendency to look past the game and go into the next round. That's such a huge matchup waiting for them. They just got to make sure they take care of the Chargers.
Yeah, much. And I have a similar feel about Sussex Hamilton, and just in terms of, I mean, anytime you have a player like Drew Patterson, a guy who can, get you 200, he had 280 yards last
5 touchdowns, right?
5 touchdowns. And when he's healthy, I mean, that's what he can do. So, when you have a big play guy like that, maybe that he can make some plays that are going to maybe swing some momentum in Hamilton's favor. But again, Homestead, they've done so much that, if it really came down to it, you got to go with the Highlanders. But that's going to be a fantastic matchup there. And also in Division II, another game that kind of pops out to me a little bit is Cedarburg-Kimberly. But in terms of, I mean, we talked a little bit before about the Big 8 and how some conferences, they don't have that non-conference game that gives you a gauge of how a team might fare against another squad. Where in this case, if Homestead wins, I'm really going to be looking at how Cedarburg fared against Kimberly, because obviously Cedarburg, played Homestead and did okay against them. And obviously Kimberly is one of the is one of the favorites to get to the final. So that's going to be another matchup that I'm going to be looking at, especially in that part of the bracket.
Definitely. Waukesha West, Whitefish Bay also going to be an entertaining battle. West still the 1 seed. Bay coming off an upset you already talked about, so they get to host this game. Waukesha West is going to have to go east a little bit, but it should be, I think, a pretty competitive game.
Yeah. And let's shift gears here to Division III real quick here. Another rematch, Brown Deer, Greendale. Zach Bond, great player, but it's
going to take a really heroic effort to beat Greendale.
Yes, and a shout out to Zach Bond. He had, I think, 340 yards passing and over 200 yards rushing in their win over Two Rivers last week. Just a phenomenal individual performance to get their team to Level 2, but it's going to take a lot to knock off Greendale.
Yeah.
What else jumps out to you?
Well, Pewaukee Catholic Memorial. This is the 4th straight year these two teams have met in the first or second round of the playoffs. Right now, CMH has a 2-1 edge. We talked about that last week. Catholic Memorial, defending D3 champion. They'll be favored to win again, but Pewaukee's still a very good team. They've kind of got a three-headed monster at running back. Colin Sternad, Ryan Stepanovich, and Jordan Jones have been really carrying the load for the Pirates all year. And a lot of people forget how close they were to Greendale. Now, Greendale had that game in hand earlier this season. That's Pewaukee's only loss, but Pewaukee ended up within a score by the end of the game. Not to say that they could have beaten Greendale, but that's a team that can hang with a team at that caliber, and CMH is another team at that caliber. So I think Pewaukee, as long as they can find a way to solve Catholic Memorial's huge size up front on both lines, and Pewaukee does have a very good defensive line, then we could see a pretty good matchup and possibly even an upset.
Yeah, that's gonna be a fantastic matchup. Another game to watch out for in Division III. Wisconsin Lutheran plays Plymouth, I believe the Eastern Wisconsin champion. So we'll see if the Vikings, Wisconsin Lutheran Vikings, get a chance to move on and maybe face Greendale in Level 3. But that's going to wrap it up for this edition of Preps Plus Extra. For more Preps Plus action, be sure to watch me and Lance Allen every Sunday night on TMJ4. Take care.